My name is Bernard Colton, and I was standing at my wife's graveside when my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I almost didn't answer it. I remember thinking, whoever this is, they can wait. I was watching them lower the casket into the ground. I was watching my son put his arm around his wife's shoulders and stare at the hole in the earth. I was trying to breathe, but the phone kept buzzing, and something made me look. The name on the screen was Hargrove, my wife's employer, the man she'd worked for over 11 years. I stepped back from the gathering just far enough and answered, "Mr. Colton." His voice was low. "Careful. I'm sorry to call at this moment. I know where you are right now. But I need you to come to my office. Today, as soon as you're able." He paused. "And please don't mention this call to your son." I stood there in the November cold with the phone pressed to my ear and the priest still speaking, and my son 20 feet away with his hand resting on his wife's back. "Why not?" I asked. Hargrove was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because I think you may be in danger, and I think your son knows why." My wife's name was Sylvia. She was 61 years old, and she died of what the doctors called rapid onset liver failure. She had been sick for about 4 months before the end. It started as fatigue, the kind you write off, the kind you blame on not sleeping well or getting older or working too hard. Then her appetite went. Then the weight. By the time we were sitting across from a specialist at St. Francis, the damage was already significant. The doctors said sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes the body gives very little warning. I believed them because I didn't have a reason not to. Sylvia had always been the healthy one. She walked every morning. She didn't drink. She ate the kind of food that made me feel guilty at the dinner table. None of it made sense. But medicine doesn't always make sense. And when the woman you've been married to for 34 years is dying in front of you, you don't sit around asking questions about why. Our son, Prescott, was attentive during those months. He and his wife, Nadine, came by the house regularly. They brought meals. They drove Sylvia to appointments when I couldn't get away from work. I was grateful. I told Prescott more than once how much it meant to me, having him step up like that. Sylvia passed on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding her hand. Prescott and Nadine handled a great deal of the funeral arrangements. I was in no condition to argue about anything. I let them choose the flowers, the readings, the catering for the reception. I sat in rooms and nodded and signed things and didn't really register what I was agreeing to. The day of the burial, Prescott handed me a document in the car on the way to the cemetery. "Dad," he said, "I know the timing is terrible, but this is something we need to move on soon. It's just a formality. The estate attorney said the sooner we file, the easier the transition will be." I looked at the papers. It was a transfer of asset title. The house, Sylvia's half of our savings account, a few investment accounts I hadn't touched in years. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. Prescott nodded. He said he understood. He put the papers back in his folder without another word. But I noticed, the way you notice things you don't want to admit you've noticed, that Nadine glanced at him from the passenger seat. Just briefly. Just for a second. And the look on her face wasn't patience or understanding. There was something else. Hargrove's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. I took a cab there from the cemetery while Prescott and Nadine went back to the house to set up for the reception. I told them I needed some air and would be there within the hour. The receptionist was expecting me. She walked me straight through. Hargrove was a compact, white-haired man in his mid-70s. The kind of man who had clearly been powerful his whole life and wore it quietly. He had known Sylvia longer than I had in a professional sense. She had built his accounts division from 6 people to 32. He stood when I entered, crossed the room, and shook my hand with both of his. "Sit down," he said, "please." He closed the door. He told me that 3 weeks before Sylvia died, she had come to his office and asked to use the company's notary. She had documents she needed witnessed. She wouldn't tell him what they were, but she asked him to hold a sealed envelope for her and not to open it or give it to anyone except me, and only after the funeral. He slid the envelope across the desk. It was cream-colored, My name was written on the front, in Sylvia's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time without picking it up. "There's something else," Hargrove said. His voice was measured, but I could hear the difficulty in it. "About 2 months ago, I noticed Sylvia was not herself. Beyond the illness, that I could see. But she seemed frightened. I asked her once, directly, if everything was all right at home. She told me it was." He folded his hands on the desk. "A week before she passed, she sent me a message from her personal phone at 11 in the evening. She asked me to look into something after she was gone. She gave me a name and told me to check financial records. I looked up. Whose name? He told me. It was my son's name. I didn't open the envelope in Hargrove's office. I held it in my lap in the cab on the way back to the house, and I looked out the window and I watched the city go by. And I thought about Prescott as a child. The way he used to fall asleep on my shoulder on long car trips. The summer, I taught him to fish at the lake house. The afternoon, he called me from the hospital to tell me that Nadine had lost their first pregnancy, and I drove 2 hours in the rain to sit with him. I thought about the document in the folder, the house, the savings, the investment accounts. I put the envelope in my coat pocket, and I went inside. The reception was full of people. Sylvia's friends, her sisters, neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. Prescott was in the kitchen with Nadine. I moved through the rooms accepting condolences, holding cups of coffee that went cold, nodding at things people said to me. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the bedroom I had shared with Sylvia for 22 years, and I opened the envelope. There were 6 pages inside. The first was a letter in her handwriting. She wrote that she had suspected something was wrong since late spring. She had started feeling sick in June, and for the first month she assumed what the doctors assumed: fatigue, stress, the ordinary decline of getting older. But she had always been healthy. She knew her body, and something felt different. In July, she had gone back to her doctor and asked for a broader blood panel. The results showed elevated heavy metal markers. Her doctor chalked it up to environmental exposure and recommended dietary changes. But Sylvia was methodical. She had been an accountant for 30 years. She didn't accept ambiguous answers. She went to a second doctor, then a third. She started keeping a journal of what she ate, when she felt worse, when she felt better. She noticed a pattern. She felt worst in the evenings after dinner, specifically on the evenings when Prescott and Nadine had been there. She wrote that she didn't want to believe it. She wrote that she told herself she was being paranoid, that she was ill, and fear makes the mind turn toward dark places. She wrote that for 6 weeks she kept the journal and said nothing because she couldn't bear what it might mean if she was right. In August, she had contacted a private lab. She sent samples of her hair, which can retain evidence of exposure over time, and asked for an independent toxicology analysis. The results were in the envelope. They showed sustained exposure to a hepatotoxic compound over a period of approximately 90 to 100 days, the kind of exposure that accumulates slowly, the kind that would look to any reasonable physician like organ failure from natural causes. The last paragraph of her letter said this: "I don't have proof of who. I have suspicion, and I have timing, and I have the fact that I was healthy before, and I am not now. I am leaving this for you, Bernard, not because I want you to carry it, but because I cannot leave this world with it still buried. I love you. I am sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of what would happen to you if they thought you knew." I sat in the bedroom until 4 in the morning. I did not sleep. I did not go back to my house, not to live. I packed a bag before Prescott and Nadine were awake, left the house while it was still dark, and took a cab to a hotel 8 miles away. I know how that sounds. I know what people would say, that I was overreacting, that I was a grieving man in the middle of the worst week of his life making panic decisions. Believe me, I considered that. I sat in that hotel room the first morning, and I spent several hours arguing with myself about whether I was losing my mind. But here is what brought me back to clarity every time. Prescott had handed me those documents in the car on the way to bury his mother. Not the week before, not the week after. That morning, before she was in the ground. That is not grief, That is a timeline. I called Hargrove from the hotel. I told him what was in the letter. I told him about the toxicology report. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Sylvia asked me to check financial records. I did. Your son opened 3 credit accounts over the past 14 months under a business name. All 3 are delinquent. The total outstanding debt is approximately $420,000. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed. There's more, he said. 2 of the accounts list your home address as the business address. I contacted an attorney the following morning. Not the estate attorney Prescott had mentioned, a different one I found on my own and called without telling anyone. Her name was Miss Aldrich. She was methodical and direct, and she did not seem surprised by anything I told her. She said the toxicology report was significant. She said I needed to go to law enforcement with it. She said I should not return to the house alone under any circumstances. I went to the police that afternoon. I brought the envelope, the letter, the lab report, everything Hargrove had given me. The detective I spoke with, a woman named Agent Marsh, or so she introduced herself, from a financial crimes unit she worked with in parallel, told me they would need to verify the lab report with an independent analysis, and that I should be prepared for the process to take time. It took 4 months. During those 4 months, I stayed away from the house. I spoke to Prescott on the phone approximately once a week. I told him I was struggling with the grief, that I needed space, that I was staying with a friend. He was sympathetic. He asked twice about the documents, both times framing it gently, apologetically, as if he hated to bring it up. I told him I wasn't ready. He said he understood. I kept my voice calm during every one of those conversations, and I want you to know that was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Prescott was arrested on a Wednesday in February. They picked up Nadine at the same time, at the house, which she had been using freely since I had stopped living there. The financial charges came first: fraud, identity theft, unauthorized use of financial accounts. Then, 2 weeks later, based on the independent toxicology findings and evidence gathered during the search of the house, the charges were amended to include criminal poisoning. My son called me from the county jail the night of his arrest. I didn't answer. He called 4 more times over the next 2 weeks. I listened to the voicemails. In the first one, he denied everything. In the second, he said the financial situation was a misunderstanding and he had been planning to tell me. In the third, he cried. In the fourth, he asked me to please come see him, just to talk, just for a few minutes. I have not gone to see him. I don't say that with satisfaction. I want to be clear about that. There is nothing in this story that has felt like satisfaction to me at any point. When I think about Prescott, I still sometimes see the child he was. I think that's the part that people who haven't been through something like this don't fully understand. That the betrayal doesn't erase the love. It sits inside the love and corrupts it. You don't stop loving someone because they did something unforgivable. You just stop being able to be near them. The trial was in September. I testified for approximately 3 hours over 2 days. The prosecution presented the toxicology evidence, the financial records, phone records showing communication between Prescott and a man who had supplied the compound, and security footage from the house that Hargrove's recommendation had led investigators to retrieve before the house was searched. Prescott's attorney argued that the toxicology findings were circumstantial, that the financial crimes were a separate matter, that there was no direct evidence placing either Prescott or Nadine in physical proximity to Sylvia's food or drink at the relevant times. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. Prescott received 19 years. Nadine received 12. I was in the courtroom when the verdicts were read. I sat in the second row. I did not cry. I think I had run out of tears sometime in those 4 months of hotel rooms and attorney meetings and phone calls. I had to keep steady and calm. After it was over, I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time before I drove anywhere. I still live in the house. I went back after the trial. It took some time before I could sleep there comfortably again, but I am stubborn and it is my home, and I decided I was not going to let what happened take that from me too. I planted a garden in the backyard this spring. Sylvia had always wanted one, and I had always been the reason it never happened. Too busy, too many other projects, always something else to do first. I planted the things she used to circle in the gardening catalogs she kept on the kitchen shelf. Lavender, rosemary, a fig tree along the south fence. I am 67 years old. I am not what anyone would call at peace. I am not sure I believe that peace is a destination you arrive at, but I get up in the morning. I walk the neighborhood like Sylvia used to. I have dinner with her sisters on Sunday. I take care of the garden. Hargrove retired last spring. He came to the house one afternoon a few months ago, unannounced, and we sat on the back porch, and I made coffee, and we didn't talk about any of it for a while. Just sat there. He looked at the garden and said Sylvia would have liked it. I told him I knew. He left the envelope on the porch table when he stood to go. I thought he had forgotten it, but when I reached for it, I saw it wasn't old. It was a new envelope, sealed, with my name on the front. Inside was a single index card. It said, "She told me, about a year before everything happened, that she had married a man who showed up for things. She meant it as the highest compliment she knew how to give." I kept the card. It is in the kitchen drawer where I keep things I don't want to lose. I think about that most mornings, about whether I have been that person, about whether there is still time to keep being him. I think there is. I keep coming back to one moment, not the verdict, not the night I read Sylvia's letter. The moment I keep returning to is the car ride to the cemetery. Prescott in the front seat, folder in his lap, timing it so that I would be too raw, too broken, too exhausted to think clearly. That was the calculation, and for a long time I was ashamed that I almost fell for it. But I stopped being ashamed of that. Grief is not stupidity. When you love someone for 34 years, you don't walk around preparing for them to be taken from you by the person you raised. That's not naivety. That's just what it means to have built a life with someone, to have trusted the people inside it. What I think about now is what actually saved me, and it wasn't luck. It was Sylvia. She was sick and frightened, and she knew she was running out of time. And instead of spending what was left of her strength on anger or despair, she spent it on being careful. She documented. She found a second doctor, then a third. She sent samples to an independent lab. She wrote 6 pages by hand, laid out everything she knew, and got it witnessed and sealed before she couldn't anymore. She did all of that while she was dying. That's not something you can stumble into. That takes a particular kind of mind. One that stays clear when everything around it is falling apart. One that refuses to let emotion be the end of the story. I think about that whenever I'm tempted to believe that nothing we do in quiet moments matters. It does. The way you train yourself to think, whether you look for evidence or look away from it, whether you ask hard questions or settle for comfortable answers, that becomes the thing that either saves you or doesn't. And then there's what came after. 4 months of hotel rooms. 4 months of phone calls I had to keep calm and steady while my chest felt like it was caving in. I have been asked, since the trial, how I managed not to confront Prescott directly, not to give anything away. Honestly, I don't know that I can take much credit for it. I just kept thinking about Sylvia, about the fact that she had stayed quiet for 6 weeks with what she knew, not because she was passive, but because she understood that a truth revealed too early to the wrong person at the wrong moment is a truth that gets buried. She taught me that without ever being able to say it directly to me. Prescott made choices, so did Nadine. And eventually every choice they made, the debt they hid, the timeline they set, the morning they handed me that folder in the car, all of it came back. Not because the universe punishes people in some tidy, mythological way, but because actions leave evidence. Because greed moves fast and gets sloppy. Because when you build something on what you've taken from someone else, it doesn't hold. I am 67 years old. I have a garden in the backyard and a card in my kitchen drawer, and I still walk the neighborhood in the mornings. I am not at peace in the way people sometimes mean when they say that, some arrived, settled place where the pain doesn't reach. But I am still here. I get up. I tend things. I show up for the people who are left. I think that's the only answer I have. Not a resolution. Just the next morning, and the one after that, and the decision to keep being someone worth trusting.